Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. It's so good to have you rejoining us today. We have a fantastic guest. And here's the big question he's going to help answer for us today. How can I be better, faster, and smarter human in an era of total chaos? Today's guest, Christian Boucousis.
That's why they call me Boo. Pat.
Boo. Okay. Yeah. And your nickname. So as we're talking today, don't think I'm talking to a little kid going, "Hey, Boo." But anyway, Boo's going to share with us some answers to that big question, applying fighter pilot principles. Boo was selected for pilot training in the Royal Australian Air Force at the age of 18, successfully graduating as a fighter pilot. He was one of only 400 fighter pilots trained over a period of 40 years, achieving his life's dream of flying an F/A-18 and flying solo at the age of 21. After 11 years of service, he was sadly medically discharged after a diagnosis, they call it bone fusing, and there's a fancy medical name for it, ankylosing spondylitis. I don't know if I said that right.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. And that ended his dream career and presented him with one of the biggest emotional and financial challenges of his life. With no other skills other than flying, he took a leap of faith to enter the business world and traveled to Afghanistan, where he established what is today one of the world's largest humanitarian service providers called CTG Global. As a founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar enterprise, he'll be the first to tell you that this period of his life was the ultimate MBA program. From walking the halls of the UN in New York and Geneva to sharing life experiences with local Afghans, he developed a true understanding of what purpose, empathy, determination, and the importance of leadership can do when running a complex business. From Afghanistan, he returned to Australia, and as if doing what he did in Afghanistan wasn't big enough, he established Mode Developments, a property development business founded to build the world's first prefabricated high-rise hotel, the $42 million Peppers King Square Hotel in Perth. Today, he's going to share some of the tools to equip us to achieve our goals, unlock our full potential, and to make a positive impact in our personal and professional lives. Boo, and you're only the second Boo I know, military, Air Force, so you got a rare nickname.
You'll have to introduce me to the other Boo. I've not met him yet.
Yeah, he's on the coast of California, and he is Korean, American-born, but Korean descent, and and he's in the U.S. United States Air Force. Man, it is awesome to have you here today, and I want to jump into what's 18 years old. What's the story behind going, oh, hey, you know what? I think I want to be an Australian fighter pilot. What's that story? What's that dream?
Well, I wanted to be a U.S. Navy pilot, actually, but I wasn't allowed. I'll be an Australian. So I took the next best thing, which was to be an Australian Hornet pilot. But really, 18 years was 13 years of wanting the job. So I kind of first saw fighter jets when I went to an air show with my dad, and I was only 5 years old, and just being immersed in such a visceral experience with jets flying over, the roar of the jets, the air being ripped apart by the afterburners, watching them taxi around, seeing the pilots in the cockpit, the helmets, oxygen masks, flight suits, and just that whiff of jet fuel, which to this day gets me motivated. And I just, after that event, I never wanted to be anything else other than a fighter pilot. I would have been a pilot if I couldn't be for some reason outside of my control. So I did start flying when I was 14. So when I was 14 years old, I worked in a Blockbuster video and saved my pennies and started to fly. And then as I got older and I did more work, I self-funded my pathway all the way up to a private pilot. So I actually flew solo in a Cessna when I was only 15. And I loved it. I found out 3 years ago I have like really chronic ADHD. And that was because my son was struggling at school and the school got me to do a test. And it kind of, my academic prowess was pretty average during school. I did 12th grade twice because I didn't get the marks to be a fighter pilot the first time. And, for me, that behavioral learning, just do what you're told, just wasn't really how I learned. But when you put me in an airplane, I learned very quickly. I was committed. I did the hours of study that I needed to do. And I think as I went through my recruitment training, the thing they kept talking to me about was my poor academic record. It got to a B+ the second time around. And they were sort of saying, there's a lot of academics here. And I was worried about it as well. But the fact I'd gone through, I got solo within 8 hours. I'd proven myself. I'd been working since the age of 14. So I'd already had jobs for 4 years. I was working in a bar when I turned 18. Drinking age in Australia is 18, so you can work in a bar then. I was mowing lawns. I was working 7 days a week. I was working 20 hours a day on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So when I turned about 40, in Australia, you can request all of your records from the Department of Defense. And it was around 25 gigabytes of scanned files. And what I probably didn't realize was the first time I went into a recruitment center at the age of 12, that event was recorded and every other event. And I was in there every week. So before I even joined the Air Force, there was hundreds of documents of me going to the recruiting center. If I went to a squadron, there was a note about it somewhere. And when it came down to it, when I had my officer selection board and why I was selected was just a comment on one of the pilots who was interviewing him. And he's like, this kid just wants it more than the rest. That was it. I got selected when I was 19. I started training when I was 19. I started the process at 18. And I just worked my tail off, and I didn't do very well at the academics as a fighter pilot, as a pilot in general, but I certainly did okay on the flying side, and then managed to graduate in the top percentile of my pilot course. I went to jets, flew in Australia for 4 years, flew in the United Kingdom for 4 years. And it was when I was in the UK flying the Tornado that I had a really bad problem with my neck. I was flying a BFM mission, a dogfighting mission. And when you fly these missions, you sort of point beak to beak with another airplane and you pass within 1,000 feet of each other. And then you're in this kind of spiral to the hard deck. And normally if you have two good pilots in two good airplanes, you kind of always end up neutral. No one ever gets the advantage. And what that's called is a flat scissor. And a flat scissor means is two airplanes, two pilots looking across at each other. You got nothing left in the tank. There's no energy left in the jet. You're just dragging your butt along at 5,000 feet on the hard deck. And when we called the knock it off, which means that's it, let's go reset and do it again. I couldn't turn my head back forwards. It was stuck looking out the left-hand side of the window. And I had to fly the airplane all the way back, like turned sideways in my seat so I could look down the front. And it took 2 weeks, and they eventually mobilized my neck. And they're kind of like, well, that was weird. And they did some more tests. And have you got any more pain? I'm like, yeah, I've spent 9 years flying in pain, like every day. I don't know. I just thought it was being a fighter pilot is painful. Pulling G, you kind of you're always in a little bit of pain. You have a bad neck, bad back. It's just normal. But they started to do more tests. I got some x-rays. I had this fusion of some of the bones in my spine. And then anyway, I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis. And so they did offer me a job to be a transport pilot. I was 30. And I was like, well, I don't think I really want to be a transport pilot. I don't want to be a pilot. I want to be a fighter pilot. So I had to kind of have a little bit of a think of what to do next. And but when I was in the United Kingdom, one of my navigators, she married a British Army parachute regiment officer So think of like 82nd Airborne Ranger kind of, or a Ranger.
Yeah.
I know they're not the same. He was that was kind of his background, and we were having a few whiskeys one night, and it was one of those 3 o'clock in the morning. He just got back from Iraq. Everyone, was a little bit disgruntled after the second Iraq war because it didn't really feel like it was the right reason to be there. And he's like, we talk about hearts and minds, but we're there and that we're running over children and barging through villages and killing people just in transit to the front. And then we're calling in medevac and no one wants to come in and say, and he's like, this is not right. And he was very disgruntled. And I was disgruntled because I was meant to go and fly on day one of the Iraq war. That's the whole reason I went to the UK, because in Australia at the time we weren't deploying, and then I really wanted to fly in combat, right? So the United Kingdom was the only combat tour that we had as Australian fighter pilots. And again, I worked my tail off and I got selected for that. And I'm like, great. And then everything changed, and the Brits were flying out of Saudi Arabia. Saudis didn't really want the second Iraq war. So they're like, look, we're not letting anyone in here to fly except for Americans and Brits. That's it. So I couldn't go. And what was really unique was my squadron in the United Kingdom was actually the squadron that was at the tip of the spear to take down the air defense system, the integrated air defense system around Iraq. So the jet I flew was like an air-to-air fighter. It wasn't meant to shoot missiles at the ground. So we went through this whole process of re-engineering the jet to fly with anti-radiation missiles. And it was basically, we were like the sacrificial lamb. So it was quite sobering because we had to bring our families in. They forecast that 40 to 50% of the pilots and the navigators wouldn't come back, that we were going to get shot down because it was perceived as being that much of a threat. So, you're with the pastor, you're doing your will, it was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And then, then they say, sorry, boo, you can't go. And then the squadron did the mission, and turns out it wasn't a bigger deal after all. So here's me and Tom in 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're in the broom closet of his military home where he and his wife live. And, I think we both had a pair of his wife's bunny rabbit slippers on. It was one of those. And we sort of just made a commitment to each other to go and do some good in the world outside the military one day. Didn't know when. I wasn't diagnosed then, so I was still happy as a fighter pilot, but he was certainly wanting to get out. So when I was diagnosed, I remembered that conversation, and I rang Tom, and I'm like, we had that. Yeah, he goes, I remember. He's like, well, let's do it. Let's start a business together. Let's go into the place that, we just spent the last 4 years blowing up, Afghanistan or Iraq. We hadn't decided at the time. And I'm sure that two young guys who are highly motivated can do something. And we did. So Tom deployed out there about 3 months before me. He got a job with a private security company out there. And we started to sniff out opportunity. I set up the business, established it all. And then we got this kind of sense that there was going to be an opportunity to bring British Army Gurkhas in to run security on the Kabul to Kandahar highway project. So he's like, look, I'm stuck in Helmand province on a job. He said, can you fly to Kabul, meet the client? So I got my Australian cowboy hats. We call them Akubras, and my Australian cowboy boots. We call them R.M. Williams. And I took a whole bunch of those, met the client they were based out of Texas, had a big operation in Kabul. And and then we won a $6 million contract to bring 40 British Army Gurkhas in to provide security. And the rest is history. By the time we sold the company, we had 6,000 staff. We were turning over hundreds of millions of dollars. It was a very big business. So it was, and I'll be honest, when I was probably 34, 35 when we wrapped that up, and I didn't think I'd even looked in the rearview mirror for 35 years. You know what I mean? I was just going. And then I came home, and home was a mess. So I got divorced. My wife was having an affair. I was very comfortable in Afghanistan. The business ended up moving into Dubai. We got contracts in Iraq, Jordan, Israel. We were all over the Middle East by about 3 years in. We'd had ambulance services, mortuary services, medical evacuation jets, all sorts of stuff. I just ended up getting diagnosed with PTSD when I got home. And then I went on a journey for a year with a psychologist. I'm like, right, well, as a fighter pilot, you're taught that everything in your life is you're accountable for. So there's no blame. There's no blame in the cockpit. There's no blame in the debrief. There's no blame in the squadron. There's no blame in life. So don't be a victim here. Use the opportunity. So I spent a year, with a psychologist, really a tough one. She was like, she wasn't really soft. She was like, come on, you need to do this. You need to do that. And I popped out the end of that, met a spiritual advisor, got on top of my ego, and then started to kind of settle down a little bit and really start to enjoy business from there. So yeah, that's a bit of a fast and furious kind of age 5 to 35 story for you.
Well, that explains the your that period of 40 years of that was the best MBA program you could go through, because nowhere in there did you say, oh yeah, I went to Harvard or Yale or University of Perth or whatever and got my MBA. You developed this business acumen, this knack for business from where? I mean, how?
Just from doing it, I think the great thing, I made a conscious decision, like I'm going to go into business. I don't know anything about business. I've got the only business I had was as a 13-year-old washing airplanes out at the local airfield, but I did that for flight hours, not for money. So I didn't really have a business background, didn't really have anyone around me. But, I think being ex-military, you're always pragmatic. So you realize that if I want to do this, I'm probably not going to be able to do it in Australia. I got to go somewhere where, and I read this in the year that we started the business, the book Starting Your First Business for Dummies came out the same year.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And I went in and read that. Well, I didn't read it because I wasn't very good at, I read thousands of historical books. I love empires. I love civilization. I love flying. So if it was a story, I read it. But if it was a fact-based nonfiction book, I was not there. So I think I got about 5 pages in. But there was something really compelling in the book, and it said, if you're going to start a business, you've got to go somewhere where supply isn't going to meet demand, because even if you do a bad job, you're going to be successful. And Afghanistan needed everything. Like it was just a mess. So that was kind of it for us. We did kind of have aspirations to be like a Blackwater type of organization, but when we got there, what we realized was, they've all got the market sewn up, they've all got the relationships, but what we could do, and it worked out to our benefit, was rather than be a prime contractor, we specialized in providing the manpower for all the prime contractors. So we ended up being exposed to multiple contracts and doing most of the work, but we weren't the prime contractor. So, and we had a great reputation. We had high quality people. If they weren't high quality, we replaced them very quickly. We did all the visas, we did all the vetting. We got them all the equipment that they needed, the weapons. We had licenses to do all of that. So people could just go, hey, I've got a problem, and they'd give it to me and Tom to solve it. And that's, again, him ex-military, me ex-fighter pilot, that's just what you love doing. You love having a mission, and then you love solving the problem, and you love achieving the mission. Like that's your DNA. And you can apply that, as I've learned in the 22 years since I've left the military. You can apply that to everything. Like you can apply it to your marriage. You can apply it to your children. You can apply it to a business. You can apply it to a non-for-profit. You can apply it to a high school football team. But once you start to really, embrace this idea of you're not going anywhere without a mission objective. You're not going to achieve the mission objective unless you study, research, learn, remain curious. And you're not going to grow if you don't embrace a culture of reflection. And that's, that is the world of the fighter pilot. It wasn't always. It was the post-Vietnam era when Boyd created the OODA loop and this idea of reflection, and everything is a loop. Every action has a consequence, and then you need to reorientate against that consequence. And that's the world of the fighter pilot. We obviously know the OODA loop. We're trained in it.
Right.
But really, it becomes more than an OODA loop. It becomes a way of being. you just approach everything with a mission objective focus and a problem solving. I'm going to debrief the hell out of this until I get there.
But and that I'm taking notes. I'm not ignoring you for the video, watchers of the show. Man, and a couple of things jumped out at me. One has absolutely nothing to do with being a fighter pilot, but I liked what you said. That one of the things in where the supply and that whole supply and demand, that even if you're not really good, you're still going to do well. And here's the first career I thought of that they never ever do well, and at least 50% of the time they're probably wrong, and they still get to keep their job, and that's weather forecasters.
Yeah, that's a tough gig, being a weather forecaster for sure.
Well, I tell friends, little children that lie grow up to be weather forecasters.
I mean, you may as well be a fortune teller, I think. Pat, I'll just try and see if I can reset this video.
Yeah, that's fine. No worries. While you're doing that, though, we can keep talking, because we do audio and video, and we'll work out any of the glitches.
Good.
So, a couple of things. One, the first question: how, being a fighter pilot, there is no room for error, and so you're probably as close. You and surgeons, particularly neurosurgeons and people working on like spines and stuff like that. There's no room for error, so you become, and tell me if I'm wrong, you become a perfectionist in your professional life, because there is that no room for error. How, and if that, my premise is right, is it difficult to separate being a perfectionist in your professional life, but not having that same, what I would call anal retentive mindset in your personal life, particularly relationships?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about being a fighter pilot is you're actually trained to understand that perfection's unattainable, and it's when you try and be perfect, that's when the internal narrative starts to tell you stories. It's actually the whole premise of my new book, which is called Flawless Leadership. And what Flawless explores is how you can get as close to perfect as possible in an endeavor without being perfect, and understanding that it's not attainable. And what was really fascinating as I started going down this rabbit hole 3 or 4 years ago was when you start to look at this word flawless and how it's used just practically. If you look at it in terms of a diamond, people understand what a flawless diamond, they understand that idea. But humans tend to conflate things and words, like we generalize. So we generalize flawless and perfect as the same thing. But if you look at the definition of a flawless diamond, it's no occlusions and perfect clarity under 10 times magnification, right? There's actually a set parameter. But when you look at the way a diamond is used, how you use a diamond, whether it's a diamond ring, necklace, earrings, whatever, the minute you introduce a jeweler, the minute you introduce a cut, the minute you introduce buyer's discretion, the minute you introduce light, all of a sudden the flawless diamond can be imperfect. But in what it is and what it can control, it is flawless. And that's the definition of a flawless leader. In what you control and who you are, you can be perfect. You can be 100% committed to growth. You can be 100% committed to learning. You can be 100% committed to everything that is within your reach. And that's the fighter pilot. You're in control of the airplane. You can know what every button does. You can know how to respond to every situation, but it requires an awful amount of commitment to learn. Perfection has its origins in Latin. It's a scholarly term. It's a theory, and it means perfect in every way, both externally and internally. So to be perfect, it means you need to control yourself and the environment, which is impossible. But what happens is we get caught in what I call the perfection death spiral. There was a study done a few years ago, and they discovered in that study that 86% of leaders suffer from undiagnosed perfectionism. And when we talk about undiagnosed perfectionism, perfectionism by nature has you thinking binary, yes, no, win, lose. And as a result, it can be very demotivating because the world is not black and white and you can't control everything. So the undiagnosed perfectionist, they're very controlling, because to be perfect, you have to control everything, and you can't. So the more you try and control, and the more you realize you can't control anything, you start to become overwhelmed. And what you need to be a leader, which is spare cognitive ability, cognitive bandwidth, starts to erode. You're so busy, you become less thoughtful. And as you become busy and less thoughtful, that perfect level of achievement gets further and further away. So you exert more control, you become more overwhelmed. And then there's an inevitable bottom to the spiral, which is burned out. And we have levels of burnout in business now that are higher than any other time in human history. We've never had over half of the leadership population burned out, 56%. And on the flip side, we've never had engagement so low, 21% engagement across the workforce. Because what does control do? Well, control means you alienate your people because you're trying to control it. You're not letting them do it. So the perfection death spiral is something you need to break. And the way you break it is introduce this practice of debriefing. You never fly a perfect mission. It never, ever, ever happens. There is always some small thing that could be done better. You might have had a great mission, but it's not going to be perfect. A perfect mission means you fly every speed, every altitude, release the weapon exactly at the right second. Like, you're talking about compliance within fractions of a second that no human can do. But what we do is we open up and we say, you know what? We have to embrace excellence here. And excellence means get really close to perfect. And to paraphrase Vince Lombardi, gentlemen will never be perfect, but through the pursuit of perfection, we'll catch excellence. And that's what flawless is. Flawless is a commitment to excellence, to be the best version of yourself in every domain, not just at work, not just on a project, not just on a mission, in everything that you do. So flawless leadership helps leaders break the perfection death spiral, but not as a concept, as a practice. And the underlying principle of it is this idea of embracing what I call ORCA. And ORCA is a 4-step loop. It's called objective, result, cause, and action. And going back to the start of the podcast, talking about this mission focus. When I built the hotel, the architect came to me and said, "Hey, I need to build this hotel." So how does everyone look at building a hotel? They go, "Okay, well, that's a hotel. This is how we build it. We use concrete. Takes 2 years. Away you go." For me, I looked at it, I'm like, right, we've got to build a hotel. And I had no preconceived ideas on how to build something. But when I got curious and I looked around the world, I saw that people were building things with prefabrication. They were putting vertical structures in a factory, and they were building buildings. They weren't 17-story towers. They were like 6 or 7 stories. And I thought, well, surely if you can do it at 7 stories, you can do it at 17. It's just Lego. And a structural engineer, an architect, 2 wonderful humans, and we created this technology where you could build a modular building. You build 1 floor a day. It's all in a factory. The outside's built, the bathrooms are built, and all you got to do is like stick it together, put some concrete in it with these big prefabricated slabs that would stop it from burning down. And we built it in half the time, and the bank didn't like us because we didn't use enough money. So, and that, to me, that's what the mission is, right? The mission is you've got to achieve a mission, but don't have preconceived ideas on how to do it. Because in the fighter community, every mission is different. Every target's different. Every time you got to go out and hit a target, it could be different weapon, different fuses. The difference between the weapon impacting at 60 degrees and 30 degrees can be the difference between winning and losing. And you've got to work backwards and say, well, for 30 degrees at a certain velocity with a certain fuse setting, where do I need to be in the sky for that? And then how do I get to that piece of sky? So most human beings live life. This is who I am. What do you want me to do? Fighter pilots reverse it and they say, that's where I need to be at the end. And I'm going to work backwards and figure out who I need to be to get there.
Yeah.
And I call that destination thinking.
Yeah. I've heard it twice this week, but attribute it to different people. And I can't remember who the people were that they were, because the names didn't ring a bell, but I know I've read it by somebody, a third person, is begin with the end in mind, mindset. Here's, again, I'm taking notes, and as you're saying so, and I love you brought up Vince Lombardi, but a different quote. I'm going to play the devil's advocate. The flip side of that leadership mindset and forward thinking, outside of the norm, not having the preconceived ideas, like you said. One of the famous quotes of Vince Lombardi is, "Winning isn't everything; it's the only thing." And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking. And then there's another quote that there's a fine, not by Lombardi, but there's a fine line between leading by example or leading from the front, if you want to call it that, and doing somebody else's job for them, because you're talking about burnout and how generations coming up now are burnt out because of, including my age bracket. I mean, older generations are burned out, or they're quitting the workforce and just giving up. Some leave, they're expats, kind of deal, is because they were raised with this mindset. If you want it done right, you have to do it yourself. And all those are so, what's the big phrase now? Limiting beliefs, and they're destructive to growing yourself personally and professionally. So here's a question I have for you, because you're that high drive, mission oriented, and like you said, 35 years were like a blur. You never look back. What do you do to relax? I asked you this question because she's a professional, competitive Grand Prix level motorcycle racer and competitive dressage horse rider, and owns her own consulting business. And she's Central European. She doesn't live in the United States. Rizzo is her last name. And I asked her the same question, because that high drive focus and don't look back, learn from your mistakes, and just drive, keep going forward. And what's the next greatest challenge you can take on? And I asked her, what do you do to relax? I'm not going to tell you what she said, but I want to hear your answer. What do you do to relax, having that mind that it sounds like it never shuts down, that you're a dreamer, a thinker, and a doer all at the same time?
Yeah, I think I just am pretty relaxed. I mean, I don't see that there's work and then there's relaxed. It's just all together. You can't turn your brain off. It's on. And I think sometimes my mom, my wife, it's always this. They always say to me, "Oh, you're working so hard. You need to relax," and it just to drive me crazy, because it's like, you need to relax. That's how you feel, and that's cool. But I don't feel the need to relax. Like, I don't, that's not what I want to do. And yeah, I'm 52 this year, and I do a lot less than I used to. I used to go diving. I used to fly airplanes when I was in the Air Force. I was running around doing all sorts of stuff all the time. And what I realize now is, it's like, I don't need to do all of that stuff. I don't need to be busy outside of work. So when I relax, I like watching football. I like watching the Formula One. I like watching high performing people, and I like watching them solve problems. I like watching them make mistakes. I like to see them prevail. like politics. I don't read the news. I don't do any of that. But for me, relaxing is sitting on a couch watching high performing people do stuff. I mean, that's probably but I can't do a beach holiday. I can't go to a resort. I can't just lie on a beach and read a book. That drives me insane. I'll go to I'm Australian. So when we lived by the beach, when I lived at home, and we'd go to the beach with the family, and 20 minutes in, I'm like, come on, let's go. Let's go do something. The rest of the family's like, Dad, let's just lay down, go for a swim, relax.
Yeah.
I know you just don't have it. But at the flip side, I have to use, it's a bit of a gift. I'm very grateful for being that way. So I have to try and use that drive to help other people. And that's why I bought Afterburner. That's why I moved to the US. I left half my family behind. I came to a country I have absolutely no network. I know no one, because I know that this fighter pilot stuff works. I know it worked for me. I know it's worked for 30 years with Afterburner, with over 3,500 companies. We know companies that lean in, win. We know sporting teams lean in, win. The first professional sporting team we ever worked with was the New York Giants in 2012, and they won the Super Bowl. And they credit the work they did with us as a core part of that. So it's something that I believe in, but I also understand that 96% of the planet doesn't really care. So you've got this paradox of, hey, follow these 4 steps, think this way, and your life will lift. It's guaranteed. I don't care whether you came from a broken family. I don't care whether you lost your legs in an accident. It doesn't matter, because if you think this way, and really a fighter pilot is a reprogrammed human being. That's what you are. You happen to fly an airplane, but you're reprogrammed to be someone who's instilled with phenomenal self-belief and a growth mindset. And when you bring self-belief and personal growth to any situation, you fulfill your full potential. You might not fulfill it at the speed you want it to, but eventually you'll get there. It's almost like it's a guarantee.
Well, I want, as soon as I share with you what her one word answer was to what do you do to relax, I'm going to share that with you. Then I want to let's pivot, if you will, to those 4 things that you're talking about. If you do these 4 things, your life is going to change. And I want you to share those, and what can our listeners start doing today towards making that change in their path. But Ms. Rizzo, and I'm just drawing a blank, I asked her, what do you do to relax? And she gave me one, and she just said one word and then stopped. I was like, okay, I'm waiting. Okay, is there more? And she goes, sleep. She goes, and then I go, no, I mean, what do you do to relax and get away from the grind? She goes, I don't. I go to sleep and for 5 or 6 hours, and I get up. That's my relaxing, and now I'm back going, 100 miles an hour. And I was like, okay, I struggle with that, me personally, because but I'll be 69 this year, so I'm like, I don't have the physiology, I don't think, sometimes to keep up that kind of grind.
No, and I'm the same. I've definitely slowed down, and it's probably a good thing. To be honest, you just become a bit more considered, and your job now, 50 plus, your job isn't about you and what you can do. It's about bringing others along in the world and doing it in a way. I mean, excuse my French here, but this is how I called it at the time. But when I was a fighter pilot, there were really great fighter pilots, and some of those great fighter pilots were assholes.
Yeah.
And some of those great fighter pilots were awesome humans and great fighter pilots. And I always had a philosophy myself, which was, whatever you do in life, I don't want to be the guy that's really good at something and an asshole. I want to, And when I left the Air Force, what touched me the most from my peers was they said, whenever we flew with you, whenever we did a mission, it never felt like we were flying with a BCAT. And a BCAT's like the highest you're going to get to. That they still felt connected and human and could just be themselves and enjoy the mission rather than it feel like it was punishing. And I said, like, at any point in time, there's only 60 fighter pilots flying in Australia, and there's only 400 of us ever that flew the Hornet. So we're a pretty small group and a pretty small team.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, my whole practice of flawless leadership is to help good people become great leaders because maybe they just don't know how. Yeah, they have an aspiration, but no one's shown them like just how to be a great leader. And I'm not a great leader. I'm just, I would never call myself that. I think you're trying to describe moving to another level. I don't think anyone is a great leader, but I think you can be the best leader you can possibly be and a force for good in the world if you just sort of frame up how your brain works and how you actually behave. I call it mastery of the 3 B's: your biases, beliefs, and behaviors. Because everyone lives in the behavior layer and the doing layer, and they don't appreciate that the way you behave is anchored by your beliefs, and your beliefs are programmed by your biases, which is your lived experience to date. And that's why they have the self-limiting belief, right? The self-limiting belief is you don't reprogram the autopilot that runs your beliefs.
Yeah, and so often people, as soon as you use the word bias, people automatically, it conjures up 2 things. 1, you're prejudiced, and 2, you're a bad person because you're biased. It's a negative, when in reality, if you do that self-reflection, we have biases that are good. It's human. It's part of our human nature. You call it survival. And so, yeah, I have biases that I'm not going to. I was a cop for almost 30 years. I have a bias and I've been retired 14. I still carry a gun everywhere I go. And my bias is it's to protect myself and others when things turn to crap.
Yeah.
That is not prejudicial. That is not negative. It is situational awareness, if you want to call it that. It's a positive thing that comes out of, yes, my lived experiences, but it's ingrained in the human existence, the survival mindset. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive right now.
No, and that's what our biases
yeah.
are. Our biases are engineered towards. They're only viewed negatively if you look at them from an aspiration perspective, but they're very good in terms of keeping you alive. That's what they're for.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, being a fighter pilot with a survival bias is not good. You will die. You need to be able to get out of that. So all a bias is a human is an autopilot program, and there's about, again, humans being humans, we have to give them all a label. There's thousands of them, but there's about 180 to 190 that are defined biases. And every one of them is subconscious. So if someone says you're biased and you push back, you're just in denial of being human. Like if someone says you're biased, you're like, yeah, I am. Cool. What you're really saying to asking someone is, what do you believe? Because
right.
Believe is what you believe is the conscious byproduct of a bias. I'm always going to be biased because I was a fighter pilot, so I am biased towards performance. And you're biased because as a cop, most of your days you're dealing with a human on their worst day.
Yeah.
As a Nepo kid who's born into a billionaire's family, you're biased towards having absolutely no awareness of that part of society. So, and when I went to Afghanistan from the world of a fighter pilot, my biases were reprogrammed towards Islam, towards war, towards humanity, because I was experiencing it. But I put myself in a position to experience something to reprogram myself.
Yeah.
Most of us choose not to do that because it feels a bit uncomfortable.
And that's the key right there. Choose the intentionality part of recognizing and you got to be honest with yourself kind of deal. So when after I retired, we moved. I mean, I wanted complete and definitive separation from what I'd done career wise for over 26 years. Well, even over 30 if you throw in the fact that I was an assistant district attorney for 4 years, or I was a prosecutor for 4 years. And we moved to Colorado. And I started I don't want to say re-engineering, but doing that self-awareness, self-reflection. And I started volunteering at a soup kitchen. And I'm telling you, in my career in law enforcement, I was not fond or terribly compassionate or empathetical towards the homeless population. And I never did anything mean or wrong or whatever, but I had that, everything begins with the thought. Thoughts become attitudes, the settled way of thinking. Attitudes are displayed in behavior, but repeated behaviors become habits, and then those habits become your culture, what you expect and accept from yourself and others. And in an honest, reflective way, my culture was, why don't you just get a job?
Yeah.
Yeah, or get off the street, kind of deal. Until I started working in a soup kitchen where in a period of 2.5 hours, and we did all the cooking, all the prep, everything to serve meals on a they came through with trays and stuff like that until COVID. We did 700 meals, served 700 meals plus in 2.5 hours, the fourth Saturday of every month. And I started being able to interact with people in that setting, not as a cop. So I shed that mindset because I wasn't a cop anymore in the first place, but started interacting with them in a very human connecting way and radically changed my perspective and attitude about homelessness, about homeless veterans, about families struggling, all those kinds of things. But I had to intentionally choose it. And kind of along that path, what are the four? Because you've said if you do these four things, and I think you've talked about them, but let's put them in, condense them. What are those four things? And then we'll go a little bit further after that.
Yeah. So ORCA is a mnemonic, objective, result, cause, and action. If you think about what those four things are, they're the future, today, yesterday, and a change in behavior. That's what you do. So when you look at the future, you need to be objective. You can't be intentional. You can't be aspirational. You have to be able to define the future in time, space, and metric. And humans don't do that very well at all. I mean, if I don't wake up in the morning and write 3 things down, I won't do it. And I've been doing this stuff for over 30 years. So the default human program is wake up in the morning, wait for an email, and then start reacting to the world. Like that's default humanity. Be reactive. So objective is define the future. And you can do that on a daily basis. You can do it on a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly, an annual, a 10-year. Took me 17 years to become a fighter pilot from when I first had the objective of being a fighter pilot. So, it can take a while. But I was intentional every day. I knew I was an academic, but I could be an athlete. And to be an athlete just meant I had to train harder than everyone else. I was only, 120-pound kid, but I rode for the first aid. I ran track. I was in the first 6 volleyball. Anything that I could see myself as being part of. I just worked at it, but it was intentional work. It wasn't just general work. It was work to achieve something. So the first thing is be objective. Another way of framing it is don't build to-do lists. Start with an achieve list and let the doing look after itself. The R is reality or the result. Like if you have an objective, but by the end of the day, you're going to achieve it or not. It's very binary. So you ask yourself, okay, do results equal objectives? Did I achieve what I set out to achieve today? And humans being humans, generally it'll be a no, because that's we suffer from what Daniel Kahneman, incredible Nobel Prize winning psychologist, calls the planning fallacy. And the planning fallacy basically means that humans plan to fail. We're far too optimistic. We aren't realistic in the way in which we view the effort that's going to be required. So just like a fighter pilot, the reality is you're going to fly a mission and stuff's going to go wrong. That's a given. Most of humanity ignores that or lives in denial. It doesn't want to go there. So the C in Orca is the curiosity part, the cause. And we ask ourselves, what did I do or not do today that contributed to me not being there? So for me, my objective is to go to the gym every day. Do I achieve it every day? No, I don't. And there's always a reason. And the normal reason is, well, I make the excuse that I was too busy. So, the A, the action, for me, the next day is not to go to the gym. It's to get to the car park of the gym. And when I set that as my action for the next day, just get to the car park, guess what happens when I get to the car park? I go to the gym. Because often because I have ankylosing spondylitis, everything is painful when it comes to physical activity because it's in every joint of your body. So I know that at the gym it's going to suck and it's not going to be fun and it's going to hurt. And then afterwards, when your body goes through the repair process, it induces inflammation. So it's going to be sore at night and sore in the morning. So I sit there, and when I set my objective, I instantly link the pain to it, and I make an excuse to not go because I'm too busy. So I have to remind myself, hey, dude, the objective is to get to the car park. That's not painful, and that's super easy to do. And the next step looks after itself. So that's kind of what Orca does. It takes big, uncomfortable things and crafts them out into behaviors and actions that you can do that are really easy. And a lot of life is about momentum and overcoming inertia. And Orca just helps you overcome that inertia of something you don't want to do. Because success at the end of the day, successful people are people that do a whole bunch of stuff they don't want to do, but they do it anyway.
Yeah, I'm writing notes. What you're sharing reminds me of, it's actually a biblical principle, but it's the non-biblical translation of it would be this: whatever you're looking for, you'll always find more of it. And so your okra, it's what objectives are you looking for? What results, causes, curiosity. What are you looking for? And then tack on to that. What I hear you saying is stack the little results, even in things you don't. It's a little thing to do something. Empty the dishwasher. The end objective this evening is I want to have a great dinner prepared for my wife, but all the dishes are dirty and they're in the dishwasher. So I have to intentionally go, okay, I'm going to run the dishwasher. I hate it. Washing dishes. I love cooking. I hate cleaning up the mess kind of deal. But stack the little things, and then those become the big package at the end of the end results you're looking for. That's my takeaway from what I hear you saying, and that makes it so much easier to digest when you're facing to start little challenges, but then you get to the big ones because, and I don't know if this is your experience, but in growing up here in the U.S., and I think this is universal, we are taught and conditioned subconsciously that we only have three choices in life when you face challenges or obstacles or events or even great opportunities that are going to require you to make some sacrifices, but it's a great opportunity, is we do one of three things: fight, flight, or freeze. And that's our go-to emotion-driven reaction. But what you're talking about is you yes, we can still have emotions, but there's a fourth response that's not emotion-driven reaction of intentionally choosing your response. But you gotta put the effort into doing that. And if you wanted to, you were talking about the really successful person that is the a-hole. The flip side, what I think of is people will so eagerly embrace this surrender mindset of two sayings. It is what it is, so there's nothing I can do about it. And that's your excuse. That's your fallback to not accept responsibility or accountability. Or in a negative way, hey, shit happens. But we won't take that mindset and flip it and go, well, no, good things will happen if and then fill in the blank. Your four actions. And I blame it in my own life. I blame it on being lazy. I call it the lazy river ride. I'll just get on the floater, the raft, and go with the flow and see what happens. And we miss so many opportunities when we have that mindset.
Yeah, and you have the same thing in professional sport. I mean, you see it all the time. It's like, a QB throws a pick, receiver drops a ball, fumble, and players and coaches and punters and commentators will say, "Oh, that's football. It's football," and it's like, well, it's not. It's that player making a mistake. That's not. We have this general. We're so afraid of putting accountability on a mistake that we avoid it. Yet that's the power. I mean, because anything that happens in the moment is the last link in a chain that contributed to it. And if you don't deconstruct the chain, you'll do it again. Because what happens is when you make a mistake, it's normally because you don't have a pre-programmed response or you're not prepared. And as a fighter pilot, if your engine catches fire, which they do sometimes without any warning whatsoever, you can't let the amygdala hijack kick in. You've got to be able to put the emotions in a box and open them later on. And I go into that in the book. I spend a lot of time talking about that. It's like the emotion response and the amygdala hijack and the fight, flight, freeze response, it shunts blood from the brain into the extremities of the body. But the brain needs blood to think. It needs to be enriched. So you're emotional, which leads to very poor decision making. It's that old story, like when I got divorced the only time. You have all these crazy thoughts. Unfortunately, your brain is nothing you can do. It just runs hot. And they have the whole idea of that's what the draft folder's for in your emails, right? Just draft it, sit on it for 24 hours, and then look at it with a new perspective.
Yeah.
So, and debriefing is actually a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, like in psychology, and to deal with trauma. I was taught this, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is just run through a logical process to get your emotions back in check. And then I was doing it, and I'm like, hey, this is debriefing. Like, what? I've been doing this in the military as a fighter pilot. I've been doing it in business, but I haven't been doing it in my own life. So then it was like, I need to be, because most frustration and agitation is due to an unmet expectation. Crime, right? the expectation is you abide by the law. The reality is you haven't. Like, but even in if you think of in law enforcement, like how often does an interrogation really debrief and get to the root cause of why the person did it? That's not really an issue. We just want the evidence that you did it. So there's always this curiosity as to, and here's my grandmother lived this, right? My grandmother, she passed away last year. She was 99 years of age. At the age of 98, she was still driving, and she was down at her local supermarket doing her weekly grocery shop. And as she came back to her car, someone was in the process of stealing it. So this woman, who's remarkable, walks up to this guy and says to him, doesn't say, "What are you doing?" She asks, "Why are you doing this? You don't need to do this." And that triggered a 30-minute conversation where she invited him to sit in the car with her and talked him away from a life of crime, and he came to her funeral. That to me is that curiosity and not getting angry at what you're doing, but asking, "Hey, why are you doing this?"
Yeah.
Just diffuse the situation. Now, I'm not saying that's going to work in every scenario, clearly, but so often we have animosity and anger and frustration and emotion in the world because no one's asking now the person, "Hey, what does good look like? Why are you here? And what can we do about this?" We just get caught in the action. Hey, you dropped the towel on the floor. You didn't do the dishwasher, and people are like, "Oh, why should I do the dishwasher?" But you go, hang on, well, what's the expectation around the dishwasher? Well, it's to help my wife and do something nice for her. That's why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to stack for the act of stacking a dishwasher. And when we start, every morning I have a puppy, wakes up at 5, take it for a walk, come in, and I don't stack the dishwasher. I'm not allowed. It's not allowed in our house. I'm only allowed to unpack it. And no one wants to unpack a dishwasher. So every time I look at that dishwasher, I'm like, I'm going to do something nice for Lauren. And that's why I do it. And that's a much better frame of mind to go into it. We call it, in the Australian Air Force, we call it the SLJ, the shitty little job. And the squadron is full of SLJs because not only are you a pilot, all the pilots have to run the squadron too. So you're doing all sorts of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so you learn to understand that the SLJ is just as important as going out there and shooting the missiles. They coexist. One cannot be in existence without the other. And I have to be the best version of myself with an SLJ, just as I need to be as a mission commander out there leading $18 billion in assets, 78 airplanes in a 5-second TOT.
Wow. And that just drives home with me Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy, and how this life is not about you. It's about everybody else you encounter and how you can use the gifts and talents and resources to make their life better. You call it a loop if you want. If I can help make your life better, it's going to make my life better. But I'm not doing it because it's going to get me something. I'm doing it with no expectation of a return. But I know deep down, it's called the law of reciprocity. I know I'm maybe not in this life, but the next, whatever. But it's not about me. It's holding the door open for somebody and letting them go in before you is not egocentric. It's about that person.
And it's also, we get so hung up on this life of living a life of purpose, but opening a door for someone else is a purposeful activity. It makes you feel good. It makes so we get confused between sit on a mountain with my drums singing Kumbaya, a life of purpose.
Yeah.
No, a life of purpose is full of purposeful activities.
Well, holding that door open, that may be the only time that day that person actually says to themselves, "Man, somebody really respected me today." That man, woman, child, it doesn't matter. I have a friend who just passed away. We went through her celebration of life and her funeral last weekend. 94 years old, and one of her grandchildren, no, I'm sorry, great granddaughter, shared the story of how Nuna was at McDonald's. She was at McDonald's, was grabbing something and leave, and she heard this calling of, you need to go talk to the homeless guy that's at the back of the building. She's like, what? Yeah, she was a very faith-filled person. So she goes around the back of the building. Sure enough, there's this guy. She brought, and he was legit homeless, smelled the whole works. Invited him to come into McDonald's with her. She bought him a lunch, and they sat there and talked for an hour and a half. That guy remembered her and her kindness and everything. And part of her talking with him was encouraging him. There's resources out there to get off the street. And for the first time, after that conversation, he took those resources. He got off the street and got permanent housing and all that, all because she didn't blow off this calling to, there's a guy at the back of the building you need to go talk to. It's not, and she would tell you, it wasn't about me. It was about this guy, yep. And God was using me to change his life or impact his life in whatever way God had planned. So
the problem is we don't do that because we're so connected to these things. We don't hear the voice, right? We don't hear the guidance. We're not connected in a way that's in service to humanity. We're just there feeding our primal need to have a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
So that's
or to escape, to just walk away, that flight, spending all that time on your phone and all that, and kids and adults, people my age, that I can't type that fast, is for a lot of us, that is an escape from the reality of the life we're living, and we're too afraid to see how we're living and take steps to make a change.
It feels like work. It's a false narrative for life.
Yeah. Give me the name of your, because you got two books, right?
So Afterburner Advantage is the current book. It's a little textbooky. It's kind of like the read this book, do what it says, and things start to work out. Flawless Leadership's a little bit more of a story, a little bit more, challenging. Let's do this, and hey, think about this. Think about some of the stuff that's going on in your life. Think about, really reflect on how you are engaging with life. Are you living in existence, or are you living with awareness? Because they're two very ways to live. To live your life.
They're both on Amazon. I mean, is that a good?
Leadership it's released in October. So it's all ready to go. We're just putting the finishing touches on it. And Afterburner Advantage is available on Amazon.
Awesome. And how can people reach out and contact you directly?
Just type my name into Google, Boucousis, and you will find me. Do it on LinkedIn, afterburner.com. If you're a business owner and you want a tune-up and you want a team to come in and help build you into a high-performing unit, and Call Me Boo is the website. But yeah, just type my name in. Just even type Boo, B-O-O speaker, B-O-O leadership. Yeah, you'll find there's like 100 podcasts out there and all sorts of stuff, but none as good as this, Pat, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. And for our listeners, ignore it when Google tells you changes if you have autocorrect and type in Boo's last name. I guarantee you, from experience, autocorrect is going to change it, and you're going to go, well, this guy doesn't even exist. I can't find him. So
yeah, I've been auto-corrected out of existence.
Yeah, they're canceled. Boo, man, this is a great conversation. I love talking with you and learning some things. I got a ton of notes. For our audience, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you. It's only because of you and your commitment to the warrior servant leader mindset. We're now in 75 countries and Hong Kong and still growing every week. We're adding new people because you're sharing the message of warrior servant leadership. So thank you to all of you. Follow us, warriorservantleadership.com. Instagram, LinkedIn, everything. Pat Welsh is, it's at Pat Welsh JD, as JD, like John David. And you'll find all our social media accounts. So with that, I can close the show like I do with every week, every day that we broadcast, is this advice. Always, always, always strive to do the right thing at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons, because that's what warriors, servants, and leaders do every day, every time. Love you all. See you next week.